Liberal journalist publicly mocks Barron Trump. His unexpected response leaves everyone speechless. The ballroom shimmered with elegance as crystal chandeliers reflected their light across the polished marble floors. Distinguished guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled under the vaulted ceilings, their laughter and conversation echoing softly. The charity gala hosted by Melania Trump was a masterpiece of refinement, a beacon of goodwill designed to raise funds for underprivileged children. At the heart of the room stood Melania herself, poised and graceful as ever. Draped in a sleek emerald green gown, she radiated confidence, yet her focus was entirely on the cause. Her words, soft yet impactful, had already inspired attendees to contribute generously. The event was unfolding exactly as planned until a shadow began to move against the light. In the far corner of the room, a man adjusted his tie, his sharp features partially obscured by a pair of thick-framed glasses. Though he looked the part of a refined guest, his furtive glances toward the stage betrayed a simmering tension. This was Jackson Cole, a notorious journalist infamous for his aggressive tactics and divisive exposés. Cole wasn't here to applaud the charitable efforts or to bid on the extravagant auction items. No, he had come with a mission to ambush the former First Lady and create headlines that would stir controversy. Barron Trump, now a towering figure at 18, observed Cole from across the room. He stood beside the dessert table, his hand resting on a glass of sparkling water, his expression calm but watchful. Though he had grown into his height and stature, Barron carried an understated confidence that drew attention only when he chose to command it. Tonight he was here to support his mother, but something about Cole's demeanor set him on edge. He noticed the way the journalist lingered just outside the main throng of guests, his eyes darting toward Melania with unsettling frequency. Barron leaned slightly toward one of the security team members stationed nearby. "Who's that?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The guard glanced in the direction Barron indicated and responded discreetly. "Jackson Cole, journalist. Not on the official guest list, but he's using a press badge as his cover. We've been keeping an eye on him." Barron's brow furrowed slightly. "Let me know if he gets too close." The security guard gave a curt nod, but Barron wasn't content to leave things at that. His instincts told him that Cole wasn't here for idle curiosity. Deciding to keep his own watchful eye on the journalist, Barron moved closer to the stage where his mother had begun her speech. Melania's voice carried across the room, calm and deliberate. "When we uplift children, we uplift the future. Tonight's gala is not about us as individuals, but about the difference we can make together." Polite applause followed her words, but as Barron scanned the crowd, he caught a glimpse of Cole retrieving something from his jacket pocket, a slim recorder, partially obscured by his hand. The journalist's lips curled into a smirk as he edged forward through the audience. Barron's grip on his glass tightened. He knew better than to react impulsively. Instead, he focused on the subtle movements of Cole's shoulders, the way he angled himself just enough to appear inconspicuous while positioning himself closer to Melania. Barron's eyes narrowed. He recognized the setup. Cole was waiting for his moment to strike. Melania continued her speech unfazed. "We are here tonight because we believe in creating opportunities, not barriers. This is our chance to build bridges for those who need them most." The crowd's applause swelled again, but Cole's movements became more deliberate. He slipped into an empty seat in the front row, his posture casual, though his fingers were already poised to press record. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out, his voice cutting through the applause just as it began to subside. "If I may ask a question?" The room stilled. Melania paused, her polite smile unfaltering, though a flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. She hadn't opened the floor for questions yet, but her diplomatic nature compelled her to acknowledge the interruption. "Of course," she replied, inclining her head slightly. Cole rose from his seat, holding his recorder aloft as if it were a badge of authority. "Mrs. Trump, many would say that this event, while admirable, is overshadowed by your family's history. How do you reconcile hosting a charity gala for children while remaining silent on policies that many argue harmed children in the past? The room's collective breath seemed to hitch. All eyes turned toward the journalist, then back to Melania. For a moment there was silence, the kind that stretched and thickened like a storm cloud ready to burst. Melania's smile didn't waver, but Barron caught the subtle shift in her expression, a flicker of discomfort quickly masked by her usual composure. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Barron took a step forward, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Excuse me," he said, his tone measured yet firm. "This is a charity gala, not a political debate. Perhaps you could save your questions for another time, or better yet, focus on the cause we're here to support." Cole turned toward Barron, his eyes narrowing as if sizing him up. "And you are? Someone who knows how to show respect at an event like this," Barron replied, his gaze steady. The subtle challenge in his voice was unmistakable. The crowd murmured, a few scattered claps of support breaking the silence. Melania looked at her son, a flicker of pride softening her expression. But the moment wasn't over yet. Cole, unwilling to back down so easily, shifted his attention back to Melania, his grip tightening on the recorder. And Barron, still calm and collected, silently vowed to be ready for whatever the journalist tried next. The stillness that followed Barron's interruption was electric, the kind of silence that stretched long enough for tension to settle in every corner of the room. Jackson Cole, now fully in the spotlight, seemed momentarily caught off guard. He hadn't anticipated anyone standing up to him so swiftly, let alone the son of the woman he had come to ambush. But Cole wasn't one to back down. A slow, calculated smirk curled across his lips as he turned his attention back to Melania. His voice, smooth yet dripping with condescension, broke the silence. "Mrs. Trump, I think the public has a right to know if your actions tonight align with your past. Surely you can address a simple question." Melania's posture remained flawless, her expression composed, though there was a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. She took a measured breath before speaking. "This evening is dedicated to the future of children in need, not the distractions of the past. If you truly care about their well-being, I invite you to contribute to our cause rather than disrupt it." Her response, delivered with poise, drew a ripple of quiet applause from the audience. But Cole wasn't done. He had come prepared to push harder, to dig deeper, and he wasn't about to lose his chance. He stepped forward slightly, his presence now looming uncomfortably close to the stage. "Contributing to a cause doesn't erase the damage already done," Cole pressed, his voice rising just enough to carry through the room. "How do you expect people to believe in your sincerity when you're family enough?" Barron's voice cut through Cole's words like a blade, sharper now, his calm replaced with a subtle edge of authority. He stepped forward, his broad shoulders and towering frame a quiet but undeniable presence. For a brief moment, the attention shifted entirely to him, and the air seemed to shift. "This event isn't about proving anything to you," Barron said, his gaze locked on Cole's, unwavering. "It's about helping children who need support. But since you seem so determined to make this about you, let's talk facts, shall we?" Cole hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the directness of Barron's words. The young man's calm yet assertive demeanor wasn't what he had expected. He had assumed Barron would stay in the background, a passive observer. Instead, he now found himself facing someone who seemed more than ready to dismantle his argument piece by piece. Baron Melania began softly, her voice a quiet plea for restraint, but Barron held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Cole. "It's okay, Mom," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "If Mr. Cole wants to discuss integrity, then let's have that discussion." The crowd shifted uneasily, the weight of the moment settling heavily. All eyes were now on Barron and Cole, the tension between them palpable. "First," Barron began, his voice steady, "let's address the elephant in the room. You're here at an event meant to support children, yet instead of contributing or covering the positive impact, you've chosen to attack the host. Why? Because it's easier to create controversy than to do something meaningful. Cole opened his mouth to respond, but Barron continued, his tone unwavering. Your presence here isn't about accountability or truth, it's about attention. You're not interested in helping anyone. You're interested in boosting your own profile at the expense of a cause that could actually change lives. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a mix of agreement and surprise. Melania watched her son with a mixture of pride and apprehension, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had always known Barron was intelligent and composed, but seeing him stand up so fearlessly filled her with a new kind of admiration. Cole, now visibly flustered, took a step back. "I'm just doing my job," he said, though the confidence in his voice had wavered. "Asking hard questions is part of holding people accountable." "Hard questions?" Barron repeated, his eyebrow arching slightly. "You mean twisting narratives to fit your agenda? Let's be honest, Mr. Cole. You're not here to hold anyone accountable. You're here because you've built a career on sensationalism and tearing people down." The room fell silent again, the weight of Barron's words hanging heavy. Cole's face reddened, his smirk now gone, replaced with a mask of barely contained frustration. Before he could respond, Barron took another step forward, closing the distance between them. His voice softened, but the intensity in his eyes didn't waver. "If you want to talk about accountability, why don't we start with yours? How many stories have you twisted to make headlines? How many people have you harmed with your reckless pursuit of clicks and views?" Cole's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The crowd, once restless, now watched in stunned silence. The journalist who had come to provoke and embarrass was suddenly on the defensive, his carefully constructed persona unraveling before their eyes. Barron stepped back slightly, his expression calm once more. "You're free to stay and learn about the work this gala is doing to help children, or if that's not interesting enough for you, you're welcome to leave. But I won't stand by while you try to turn this event into a spectacle for your own gain." The crowd erupted into applause, the tension breaking as guests voiced their support. Melania's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she watched her son handle the situation with such grace and strength. Cole, visibly shaken, muttered something under his breath and turned to leave, his retreat marked by a quiet wave of satisfaction rippling through the room. As he disappeared into the crowd, Barron turned back to his mother, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "Sorry if that was too much," he said softly. Melania reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her voice filled with emotion. "No, Barron, it was perfect." The storm had passed, but Barron knew it wasn't over. Jackson Cole wasn't the type to give up so easily, and neither was he. Jackson Cole walked briskly through the opulent hallways of the venue, his mind racing. The humiliation he had just endured at the hands of a teenager was unlike anything he had experienced in his career. Barron Trump's calm, surgical dismantling of his argument still echoed in his ears. He clutched his recorder tightly, his knuckles white. He needed a new plan. This wasn't over. In the ballroom, Barron was back at his mother's side. Guests were returning their focus to the evening's program, though whispers still passed between them. The young man's commanding presence had shifted the energy in the room, drawing quiet admiration from those who had witnessed the confrontation. "Barron," Melania said quietly as she leaned toward him, her voice warm but tinged with concern. "You handled that beautifully, but I know this man's type. He will not let this go so easily." Barron nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "I know. That's why I'm not done with him either." Melania's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes reflected the weight of years spent under public scrutiny. She placed a gentle hand on her son's arm. "Just be careful. He'll look for any weakness to exploit." Barron met her gaze and gave a small nod. "Don't worry, Mom. He won't find one." Cole paced outside the building, the crisp night air doing little to cool his simmering frustration. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly scrolling through his contacts. He paused briefly before tapping on a name. Mitch Donovan, a producer at one of the most controversial news outlets in the country. "Mitch, it's Cole," he said, his voice steady despite the anger brewing beneath. I've got a story brewing. I need you to help me blow it wide open." On the other end of the line, Donovan's voice carried a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "What kind of story?" "Melania Trump. Charity gala. Hypocrisy. Oh, and her golden boy Barron. Turns out he's not as squeaky clean as everyone thinks." Donovan let out a low whistle. "You've got proof." "Not yet," Cole admitted, "but I will. Just give me a few hours." Donovan hesitated for a moment before replying. "Fine, but if you're going after them, make sure you've got something solid. Otherwise, this blows up in your face." Cole ended the call, his resolve hardening. If he couldn't find dirt on Melania or Barron, he would create it. His career depended on it now. Meanwhile, back inside the ballroom, Barron was quietly strategizing. He excused himself from his mother's side and made his way to the security team stationed near the entrance. "Any updates on Cole?" he asked the head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Harris. Harris nodded. "He left the building about 10 minutes ago, but we're monitoring the perimeter. He's not the type to walk away without a backup plan." "Good," Barron said, his voice calm but firm. "Let me know the second he makes a move. I want everything he does documented." Harris raised an eyebrow. "You think he's planning something bigger?" "I know he is," Barron replied. "And I want to be ready when he does." As Harris nodded and stepped away, Barron pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his contacts. He wasn't just going to wait for Cole to act, he was going to get ahead of him. He dialed a number and waited as the line rang. "Mr. Lewis, it's Barron Trump. I need a favor." Hours later, Cole sat in a dimly lit hotel room, his laptop open in front of him. The screen displayed a draft of an incendiary article titled "The Truth Behind the Trump Charity Gala, A Family of Facades." The piece was filled with half-truths and insinuations, crafted carefully to paint Melania and Barron as opportunists, using philanthropy as a cover for their personal ambitions. But Cole wasn't satisfied. He needed something more, a smoking gun to make the story impossible to ignore. He scrolled through old photos of the Trump family, his eyes narrowing as he paused on an image of Barron from years ago, his expression somber as he stood beside his father. A sinister idea began to form. He opened a photo editing program and began to manipulate the image, twisting the context to fit his narrative. By the time he finished, the doctored photo showed a young Barron standing near a controversial figure from his father's administration. The caption he added read, "Barron Trump's Early Lessons in Power and Privilege." Cole leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. Let's see how perfect the golden boy looks now. The following morning, Cole's article hit the web, accompanied by the manipulated image. It spread like wildfire, drawing both outrage and skepticism. News outlets picked it up, amplifying the controversy, while social media exploded with heated debates. But Barron had been ready. Within hours, his team, led by Mr. Lewis, released a detailed counter-report exposing the photo as a fabrication. They presented timestamps, metadata, and witness accounts that not only disproved Cole's claims, but also revealed his history of unethical journalism. The revelation hit hard. Cole's credibility, already precarious, began to crumble as former colleagues and sources came forward to distance themselves from him. Sponsors pulled their support, and his employer issued a public statement condemning his actions. As the backlash against Cole grew, Barron quietly observed from his family's estate. He felt no satisfaction in the journalist's downfall, only a sense of resolve. Cole had chosen this path, and Barron had merely ensured the truth prevailed. By evening, Cole's name trended online, but not for the reasons he had hoped. Headlines denounced his tactics, and his career, once built on sensationalism, lay in ruins. In the ballroom of their estate, Melania approached Barron, her expression one of quiet pride. "You didn't just protect me," she said softly. "You protected the truth. That takes strength." Barron offered her a small smile. "It wasn't about protecting us, Mom. It was about standing up to people like him. If we let them win, they'll never stop." Melania nodded, her eyes glistening. And you did it with grace. Your father would be proud." As the evening settled into quiet calm, Barron walked out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his face. He stared out into the horizon, knowing that there would always be another battle, another challenge. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate's manicured gardens. Inside the Trump residence, the atmosphere was unusually quiet, as though the events of the past 24 hours had left a mark on everyone. In the living room, Barron sat on a leather armchair, his phone balanced in one hand as he scanned the latest news updates. The headlines told a story of triumph, but his expression remained unreadable. Journalist Jackson Cole faces backlash over fabricated article. Barron Trump exposes media deception at Gala Integrity versus Sensationalism, a case study in modern journalism. The world was talking, and for once they weren't criticizing his family. Barron felt a fleeting sense of relief, but also a nagging discomfort. He wasn't naive. Today's victory wouldn't shield them from tomorrow's attacks. Still, for now, the truth had prevailed. In the adjoining room, Melania gazed out the window, her hands loosely clasped. She had always maintained a stoic composure, but today's events had stirred something deeper. Watching her son step into the public arena with such grace and resolve had been both a revelation and a reminder. She thought back to when Barron was younger, shielded from the relentless scrutiny that came with their family name. She had worked hard to protect him, but she always knew the day would come when he'd have to stand on his own. What she hadn't anticipated was how fiercely and instinctively he would rise to defend her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Turning, she saw Barron enter the room, his phone tucked away. His tall frame carried an ease that belied the weight of the day's events. "You've been quiet," she said gently, offering him a small smile. "Just thinking," Barron replied, settling into a chair across from her. "About what comes next?" Melania tilted her head slightly, studying him. "What do you mean?" Barron hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window. "Cole isn't the only one who'll try something like this. He's just the latest. There'll be others." Melania nodded slowly. "You're right. But you can't carry the burden of anticipating every attack. Sometimes all you can do is respond when the time comes." Barron met her eyes, a flicker of determination in his own. "Then we need to make sure we're ready, not just to defend ourselves, but to show people the truth. That's the only way to stop them." Elsewhere, Jackson Cole sat in the corner of a dingy cafe, a stark contrast to the grand ballroom he had infiltrated the night before. His laptop sat closed on the table, his phone buzzing with notifications he refused to check. The fallout had been swift and brutal. His editor had called him that morning, their voice icy with disappointment. "You're suspended indefinitely, pending investigation," they had said. "We can't afford to be associated with this kind of controversy." Hours later, his inbox was flooded with messages, former colleagues distancing themselves, sponsors pulling out, and angry readers demanding accountability. Even Mitch Donovan, the producer he had enlisted for help, had sent a curt message, "You're on your own." Cole's hand clenched around his coffee cup, his frustration boiling over. How had it all gone so wrong? He had built a career on navigating these waters, on crafting narratives that drew attention. But this time, he had underestimated his opponent. "Barron Trump," he muttered under his breath, the name laced with bitterness. The teenager had dismantled him so thoroughly, so methodically, that Cole's confidence in his own tactics was shaken. For the first time, he wondered if he had finally gone too far. Back at the estate, the day wound down with an air of quiet reflection. Melania and Barron joined the rest of the family for a modest dinner, the conversation light, but tinged with an unspoken acknowledgement of what had transpired. Afterward, Barron returned to his room, where he found an email waiting in his inbox. It was from a high school teacher he hadn't spoken to in years, someone who had once encouraged him to think critically and stand up for what he believed in. Baron, I watched what happened at the gala, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. The way you handled yourself was remarkable, not just for someone your age, but for anyone. Keep using your voice. It matters more than you know. Mr. Harris Barron reread the message, a small smile tugging at his lips. He had acted out of instinct, driven by the need to protect his mother and their cause. But seeing how his actions resonated with others reminded him of the broader impact of standing up for what was right. Later that evening, Barron found himself on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his face. The city lights glittered in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond their walls. He stood there for a long time, thinking not just about the events of the past day, but about the future. The door behind him opened softly, and Melania stepped out, draping a shawl around her shoulders. She joined him at the railing, her gaze also fixed on the horizon. "Baron," she said after a moment, her voice soft but firm, "you've grown into someone your father and I are incredibly proud of. What you did today showed strength and wisdom beyond your years." Barron turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I just did what I thought was right, and that's exactly why it mattered," Melania replied, her eyes meeting his. "But remember, strength isn't just about defending yourself. It's also about knowing when to step back and let the truth speak for itself." Barron nodded slowly, her words sinking in. He still had much to learn, but today had shown him that he was capable of facing challenges head-on. And as he stood there beside his mother, the weight of their shared journey settled into something lighter, a sense of purpose that would guide him forward. The following morning dawned bright and cool, sunlight streaming through the windows of the Trump estate. Yet, for Barron, the lightness of the day felt at odds with the heaviness of the situation that lingered. Despite his victory, he understood that the ripple effects of the confrontation with Jackson Cole were only beginning to unfold. Barron sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in hand, scrolling through his phone. Headlines still dominated the news cycle, and his name, once a quiet fixture of tabloid curiosity, was now at the forefront of a broader conversation about ethics in journalism. Teen dismantles journalists' tactics at gala, the internet reacts. Barron Trump, rising voice for truth, or just another figure in the Trump legacy. Journalist Jackson Cole, suspended amid fabrication scandal. The public reaction was polarizing. While many lauded Barron for his poise and maturity, others questioned whether the incident was a carefully orchestrated attempt by the family to reclaim their narrative. Barron had anticipated this. It was impossible to change everyone's perception overnight, but what mattered to him was that the truth had been exposed. As the morning stretched on, Barron's phone buzzed with a message from the estate's security team. "Mr. Trump, there's someone at the gate requesting to speak with you, a Jackson Cole." Barron stared at the message, his brow furrowing. It wasn't what he had expected. A flood of possibilities ran through his mind. Was Cole here to apologize, to argue, or to escalate? Barron didn't respond immediately, instead taking a moment to weigh his options. Finally, he typed back a simple reply, "Let him in." Minutes later, Barron stood in the foyer as the front doors opened to reveal Cole, looking markedly different from the man who had stormed the gala the night before. His usually sharp suit was replaced by a rumpled blazer, and his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. "You wanted to see me?" Barron asked, his voice calm but guarded. Cole cleared his throat, his usual bravado nowhere to be seen. "I came to talk, and maybe to explain." Barron tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm listening." Cole hesitated, his hands fidgeting as he searched for the right words. "Look," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "What happened last night, it got out of hand. I let my ego and my need for a story take over, and I crossed a line." Barron crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "You didn't just cross a line. You tried to destroy my mother's reputation and mine, without any regard for the truth." Cole flinched at the words, but nodded. You're right. I thought I was exposing hypocrisy, but in reality, I was just looking for a headline that would keep me relevant. And now, I've lost everything. There was a rawness to Cole's admission that caught Barron off guard. He had expected defensiveness, perhaps even anger, but not this vulnerability. Still, he wasn't ready to let his guard down. "And you think coming here will fix that?" Barron asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. Cole shook his head. "No, I know it won't. But I needed to own up to what I did to you and your mother. I know an apology won't undo the damage, but it's all I can offer." Barron studied Cole for a long moment, his thoughts racing. The man before him was a shadow of the confident provocateur who had disrupted the gala. His career was in shambles, his reputation irreparably tarnished. Barron felt a flicker of something unexpected pity, but he also knew that this wasn't just about Cole. It was about setting a precedent for how he would handle moments like this in the future. "You've made your apology," Barron said finally, his voice measured. "And while I appreciate it, I don't think it's me you owe the most to. My mother deserves to hear it too." Cole's eyes widened slightly. "You'd let me speak to her? After everything?" Barron nodded. "She's the one you tried to humiliate. If you're serious about taking responsibility, then you need to face her." Later that afternoon, Melania sat across from Cole in the estate's sunlit drawing room, her poise as unshakable as ever. Cole, by contrast, seemed small, his usual confidence entirely absent. "I won't waste your time," he began, his voice steady but low. "I let my ambition cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I disrespected you, your son, and the cause you were working to support. I'm deeply sorry." Melania regarded him silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a calm but firm tone, she replied, "Your actions caused harm, Mr. Cole. Not just to me or my family, but to the children this event was meant to help. Apologies are words. Actions matter more." Cole nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I understand." Melania leaned forward slightly, her voice softening. "I hope you've learned from this. The truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it." The next day, Cole released a statement to the press, admitting to his unethical behavior and apologizing to the Trumps. While the statement didn't redeem him in the public eye, it marked a turning point in the narrative. Discussions shifted from the scandal to broader issues of journalistic integrity and the responsibility of the media. Barron watched the fallout quietly, his resolve strengthening with every headline. He had stepped into the public arena not by choice, but by necessity, and he realized now that he had a voice worth using not just for his family, but for the principles he believed in. That evening, Barron stood once again on the balcony, the cool night air wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. Melania joined him, her presence a quiet reassurance. "You handled yourself well today," she said softly, her eyes shining with pride. Barron turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I wasn't sure if I should let him speak to you, but I felt like maybe he needed to hear your perspective." Melania nodded. "Sometimes offering grace to someone who doesn't deserve it is the most powerful thing you can do. It's not about excusing their actions, it's about showing them a better way." Barron smiled faintly, the weight of the past few days finally lifting. He still had much to learn, but he knew he was on the right path. And as he looked out at the city lights, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to standing up for truth and integrity, no matter the cost. And so, the truth prevailed, and those who sought to manipulate it faced the consequences. Barron's strength, integrity, and unwavering defense of his family became a lesson for us all that standing up for what's right can change the narrative. If this story inspired you or made you think differently about courage and justice, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for more powerful stories like this. Together, let's keep shining a light on truth and resilience. See you in the next one.